I never imagined that coming home a few hours earlier would turn into the most painful memory of my life. That afternoon, the hospital had discharged me sooner than expected. The treatment was finally over, and all I wanted was to see my daughter, to hold her again after weeks of lying in a cold hospital bed. The air in those rooms smelled like disinfectant and loneliness. Every night, I prayed she was waiting for me, missing me the same way I missed her. I took the bus home, holding a small bouquet of flowers I had bought from a vendor near the station. The sun was setting, painting the city gold, and my heart felt light. I was finally going back to my little girl. But when I turned the corner onto our street, something felt off. The car parked in the driveway wasn't ours. The front yard lights were on, and laughter echoed from inside. Laughter I didn't recognize. My hands started shaking as I unlocked the gate. I walked in quietly, expecting to surprise her. Maybe she had friends visiting. But the moment I reached the living room door, my heart stopped. There she was, my daughter, my only daughter, sitting on the couch beside a man I had never seen before. She was wearing my favorite blue dress, the one I had kept for special occasions. She looked happy, happier than I had seen her in years. I smiled softly and whispered, "Sweetheart?" The laughter died instantly. Her face turned pale. For a brief second, I thought she would run to me, hug me, cry in my arms like old times. But instead, she froze, then stood up, her eyes wide, filled not with love, but with fear. "Who let you in here?" she snapped. I blinked, unsure if I had heard her right. "It's me, honey. Your mother." The man beside her looked confused. My daughter grabbed her phone, her hands trembling. "Stay where you are," she warned. "If you come any closer, I'll call the police." I couldn't breathe. My legs felt weak. I thought she was joking, that maybe she was angry I hadn't told her I was coming home. But then I saw the way she looked at me, as if I were a stranger. "Why are you doing this?" I whispered. She pressed the phone to her ear. "Please," she said, her voice breaking. "Send someone. She's here." And in that moment, everything inside me collapsed. The house I had built, the love I had given, none of it seemed to exist anymore. I was standing in my own home, but I no longer belonged there. And then she said something that shattered what was left of my heart. "If your own child called the police on you, what would you do? Tell me in the comments below. I want to know what you think is really happening in this story." Her words cut through me like glass. "You shouldn't be here," she said coldly, clutching her phone as if I were some kind of danger. My mouth went dry. "Sweetheart, what are you talking about? This is my house." She shook her head. "No," she said. "It was your house. You gave it away." I stared at her, not understanding. My hands trembled as I looked around the living room. The furniture was the same, but something was different. Pictures were missing. My mother's old clock was gone. And the smell. It no longer felt like home. The man beside her stepped forward. "Ma'am," he said nervously, "I think there's been some kind of mistake." Mistake. The word echoed in my mind. I reached into my bag and pulled out the keys I had kept on my bedside table for years. They still fit the lock at the gate. "I don't understand," I whispered. "This is where I raised you. Where your father and I built everything we had." Her eyes filled with tears, but there was something else. Anger. "Mum," she said softly, "you don't remember, do you?" "Remember what?" I asked. "The day you signed the papers. The doctor said it was the medication. You weren't thinking clearly. You sold the house. To me, my knees gave out. The room spun. "That's not true," I stammered. "I would never—" She looked away. "You did. You said you wanted me to have security, that if something happened to you, I shouldn't have to struggle. I didn't want to, but you insisted." Tears filled my eyes. I tried to speak, but nothing came out. Somewhere deep inside, I knew she was telling the truth. I remembered the papers, the notary office, her hand guiding mine as I signed. At the time, it felt right, a gift of love. But now, standing there, being treated like an intruder, it felt like betrayal. The man, her husband, I realized, gently touched her shoulder. "Maybe we should just let her rest," he said, but my daughter's voice hardened again. "No," she said. "She needs help. She doesn't remember what she's done. That's why she left the hospital early. She's not well." My heart cracked. "Not well?" I whispered. "Is that what you think of me now?" Her eyes glistened. "Mom, please. I called them because I'm scared. You show up without warning, confused, saying things that don't make sense. I'm trying to protect you, but all I could hear was the sound of my own breathing. Shallow, broken, desperate. I wasn't dangerous. I wasn't lost. I was a mother who came home and found she no longer had one. And then, faintly, I heard the sirens outside. Have you ever done something out of love, only to have it turn against you? Share your thoughts in the comments. I want to know what you would have done in her place." The flashing blue and red lights painted the walls of the living room as the sirens grew louder. My heart was pounding so fast, it felt like it could burst. I stood there, frozen, my hands shaking, still clutching the wilted flowers I had brought for her. The petals had begun to fall, one by one, onto the floor that used to feel like mine. When the doorbell rang, she didn't move. She looked at me with tears streaming down her cheeks, as if torn between guilt and fear. "Please," she whispered, "don't make this harder." The door opened, and two officers stepped in, a man and a woman. They looked around carefully, scanning the room. "Ma'am," the woman said gently, "we got a call about a possible trespasser." I swallowed hard. My voice trembled as I spoke. "I'm not a trespasser," I said softly. "This is my home." The younger officer glanced at my daughter. "Is this your mother, ma'am?" My daughter hesitated. Her lips quivered before she answered, "Yes. But she's been sick. She left the hospital without permission." I felt something inside me collapse. The way she said sick, like I was broken, like I didn't belong anywhere. The officers exchanged a look, one that said more than words ever could. They weren't sure who to believe. "Do you have any ID?" the woman asked me kindly. I fumbled in my purse, pulling out my worn-out wallet. My hospital bracelet was still there, wrapped around my wrist. "I just wanted to come home," I said. "To see my daughter?" I didn't mean any harm. The woman nodded slowly, trying to calm the tension. "We understand. Why don't we all sit down and talk, all right?" But my daughter's voice cut through the room like a knife. "No," she said firmly. "I think it's best if she goes back to the hospital. She needs to be checked. She's confused. She doesn't even remember selling the house." "Selling the house?" one of the officers repeated, puzzled. I felt the room spin again. I looked around, searching for something familiar. A photo, a memory, anything that proved I still belonged here. But everything that was once mine had been replaced. The curtains were new. The photos on the wall were of her and her husband. Not a single trace of me remained. I turned to the officers, my voice trembling. "Please, just give me a moment. I can explain." But before I could finish, My daughter stepped forward, her voice breaking. "Mum, stop. You're not well. I didn't want to do this, but you need help." The tears I had held back finally escaped. I looked into her eyes and saw the little girl I used to tuck into bed, the one who used to say she'd never leave me, and now she was the one sending me away. The officer sighed softly, then said, "Ma'am, maybe we can call someone from the hospital to talk this through." I nodded numbly. My voice came out barely above a whisper. "Do whatever you have to do." And as they stepped outside to make the call, I was left standing there in the house that was once filled with laughter, now silent, except for the sound of my own heart breaking. Would you forgive someone who claimed they were protecting you while breaking your heart? Tell me in the comments. I want to know what forgiveness means to you. I could hear the officers outside, speaking quietly into their radios. Their voices blurred into the distance, but the weight of their words lingered in the air. I stood still, surrounded by the echoes of a life that no longer belonged to me. My daughter sat on the couch, hands pressed to her face, trembling. The man, her husband, I assumed, stood near the kitchen, avoiding my eyes. The silence between us was suffocating. After a moment, I gathered what little strength I had left. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked softly. She looked up, her mascara smudged from tears. "Tell you what?" "That you didn't want me here anymore." Her eyes widened, and for a second, I saw that same scared little girl she once was, the one who used to cling to me when thunder scared her. But the softness vanished just as quickly. "Mum," she said, her voice breaking, "it's not like that. You've been sick for months. You don't remember things right. You get angry, confused. I tried to help, but you called the police," I interrupted, my voice trembling. "You called strangers to take me away." She opened her mouth to speak, but stopped. Her silence was louder than any answer she could have given. My eyes burned. I turned toward the window, trying to steady my breathing. The reflection staring back at me was barely recognizable. Tired eyes, graying curls, a woman who no longer knew where she belonged. "I didn't mean to scare you," I said. "I just wanted to see you. I thought maybe we could have dinner, talk like we used to." My words broke mid-sentence. The memories came rushing, us baking cookies on Sundays, watching movies in our pajamas, laughing until our sides hurt. Now, all that felt like another lifetime. She rose slowly and walked toward me. "Mom," she whispered, "I didn't mean to hurt you. But I'm scared. You forget things, you disappear, and sometimes you don't make sense. You can't live alone anymore." The truth cut deep because part of me knew she wasn't lying. The illness had stolen pieces of my memory. Names, dates, moments that slipped away like sand between my fingers. But my love for her, that was something I never forgot. Just then, there was a knock on the door. One of the officers returned, holding a clipboard. "We spoke to the hospital," he said gently. "They confirmed you were discharged this morning, but they were concerned you hadn't been cleared to leave." I looked at him, confused. "They said I could go home." He nodded slowly. "Ma'am, they meant the care facility, not here." The words hit like a blow to the chest. My daughter turned her face away, ashamed. Suddenly, I understood everything. The hospital. The papers I didn't remember signing. The room with the white curtains. I wasn't going home that day. I was running from it. I closed my eyes. The pain was sharp, raw, unbearable. I whispered, "So this is it then? I lost my home. I lost my daughter." The officer hesitated, lowering his voice. "No, ma'am. You didn't lose her. She's right here. But when I looked at her again, I knew. I had already lost her long before that night. Have you ever realized you lost something long before you noticed it was gone? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your story might help someone who's felt the same. The rain began to fall softly outside, tapping against the window like a quiet rhythm to my despair. The officer's words kept echoing in my mind. The care facility. My hands started to tremble, and for a moment, I couldn't tell if it was from the cold or from the shame crawling under my skin. A care facility. I had promised myself I'd never end up in one. I wanted to grow old surrounded by love, not by white walls and strangers. I turned toward my daughter, searching her face for mercy, for understanding. Is that true? I asked. You sent me there? Her eyes filled again with tears, but she didn't answer. Instead, her husband spoke, his voice calm, maybe too calm. She didn't want to, ma'am. But you needed help. The doctors said it was the safest place for you. The safest place? I whispered, my voice trembling. You mean the place where people forget who they are? Where no one calls you by name? My daughter sobbed, covering her mouth. Mum, please. Don't say that. You were confused. You left the stove on twice. You wandered outside in the rain. I was scared something would happen to you. Her words were supposed to sound like love, but they felt like a knife wrapped in silk. I remembered that night, standing barefoot in the rain, calling her name. But she never answered. I had been waiting for her visit for weeks. Maybe I had left the stove on. Maybe I had forgotten things. But wasn't love supposed to protect, not replace? The officer looked between us, clearly uncomfortable. Maybe we should give you two a moment, he said gently, and stepped outside. The silence that followed was thick, heavy, suffocating. I walked slowly to the living room table, tracing my fingers along its polished surface. The wood felt cold, foreign, no longer familiar. I noticed a framed photo, my daughter on her wedding day, her father's smile missing from the frame. I had been there, but my face wasn't in the picture. They'd cropped me out. Tears burned down my cheeks. You erased me, I said softly. Even from the photos. She broke down. Mum, please stop. I didn't mean to, Her voice cracked. I just couldn't watch you disappear. I turned to her, my chest aching. But you did, sweetheart. You watched. You let me fade away. She collapsed onto the couch, crying like a child again. For a second, I almost reached out to hold her, to tell her I understood, to tell her I forgave her. But I couldn't move. My love for her was still there, deep, eternal. But the hurt had rooted itself too deeply. Through the window, I could see the flashing lights reflecting off the wet street. The officers were talking quietly, waiting for the ambulance that would soon take me back. My fingers clutched the edge of the table so tightly my knuckles turned white. I didn't want to go, not yet. And then I whispered something that even surprised me. I'm not leaving until you tell me the truth. She lifted her head, her eyes swollen from crying. The truth? She repeated. Yes, I said. There's something you're not telling me. I can feel it. The color drained from her face. Her lips trembled, but no words came. That silence told me everything. And yet, nothing at all. Tell me in the comments, what do you think she's hiding from her mother? Her silence lingered in the air, heavier than any words she could have spoken. I could hear the rain falling harder now, tapping against the glass like an impatient heartbeat. She looked at me, her lips parting, but no sound came out. My chest tightened. I knew that look. It was the same one she had when she was a child and tried to hide a broken vase behind her back. Guilt, fear, regret. "Tell me," I said softly, my voice trembling. "Please." Her eyes darted toward the door, where the officers stood waiting under the porch light, their radios crackling faintly. Her husband took a step forward. "Maybe now isn't the time," he muttered. But I raised my hand, stopping him. "It's exactly the time," I said, my voice cracking but firm. "If you called the police on me, if you took my home, if you sent me away, at least give me the truth." My daughter took a deep breath and wiped her tears with the back of her hand. "Mum," she said finally, "you weren't supposed to see this." "Not yet. See what?" I whispered. She hesitated for a long moment, then turned toward the hallway. I followed her, slowly, my legs weak, my heart pounding with a strange mix of fear and hope. She opened the door to what used to be my bedroom, and my world fell apart. The walls had been repainted, the furniture replaced. The photo of me and her father, the one that used to sit by my bedside, was gone. In its place stood a crib, soft pink blankets, a mobile spinning lazily above it, and a faint smell of baby powder in the air. My breath caught in my throat. I turned to her, shaking. "Whose room is this?" She didn't look at me. "Mine," she whispered. "Ours. We're having a baby?" The words didn't register at first. "A baby?" I repeated numbly. Her husband stepped closer, putting his arm around her. "We were going to tell you," he said gently. "But after everything, we didn't know how. The doctors said stress could make things worse for you." I stared at the crib, my heart breaking in silence. For months, I had prayed for something to bring light back into her life. I used to tell her she'd be an amazing mother someday, and now that she had erased me completely from that picture. "You were afraid I'd scare the baby," I said quietly. Tears streamed down her face. "No, Mom. I was afraid you'd forget who I am one day, that you'd hold the baby and not remember she's your granddaughter." My throat tightened. Every word she said cut deeper. "So instead, you decided to forget me first?" She broke down sobbing, sinking to her knees. The pain in her voice was raw, real, human. "I didn't want to, Mum. I just didn't know what else to do." Behind me, the officers exchanged glances. The rain had stopped, but thunder rumbled in the distance. I stood there, staring at that tiny crib, realizing that even before she was born, my granddaughter already lived in a world where I was a ghost. If you discovered your child was hiding something out of fear, would you forgive them or walk away? Tell me in the comments. What would you have done in her place? For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sound in the room was the faint creak of the mobile above the crib, spinning slowly, singing its gentle lullaby. The same kind of lullaby I used to hum when my daughter couldn't sleep. Soft, soothing, full of love. And now, that same sound tore through my heart like a blade. I stared at the crib, unable to move, my eyes blurring with tears. "So this is why," I whispered. "This is why you didn't want me here." My daughter looked up at me, her face pale, streaked with tears. "Mum, please try to understand," she said, her voice trembling. "You've been through so much. You forget things. You wander. I couldn't risk something happening around the baby. I thought I was protecting everyone, including you. Protecting me," I said, the words heavy on my tongue. "By taking my home? By calling the police?" She flinched, her hand instinctively resting on her stomach. I didn't know what else to do. The man, her husband, tried to intervene. She's been under a lot of pressure, Mom. It's been hard for both of you, but I wasn't listening. My gaze stayed fixed on the tiny crib, on the fragile pink blanket folded neatly inside. I imagined my daughter as a baby, the same way she must have looked when I brought her home for the first time. I could almost hear her giggle again, smell the milk on her breath, feel the warmth of her little fingers clutching mine. That memory hit me like a wave, and I felt my legs weaken beneath me. "Do you remember when you were born?" I said quietly. "Your father worked 3 jobs just so we could buy this house. Every corner of it has a piece of our lives. I used to dream that one day you'd raise your family here, and I'd watch from the porch, knitting, waiting for you to visit with your children." My voice broke, trembling under the weight of all those lost dreams. "But you didn't visit? You took the house and locked me out of it." Her sobs grew louder, her shoulders shaking uncontrollably. "I didn't mean to hurt you, Mum. I swear I didn't." I walked closer, slowly, until I stood right in front of her. For a second, she looked up, and I could see the little girl in her eyes again. I gently reached out my trembling hand and touched her face. "I know you didn't mean to," I whispered, "but intentions don't erase pain." Behind us, the officers returned. "Ma'am," one said softly, "the ambulance is here. They just want to take you for a checkup, make sure everything's all right." I didn't answer. My eyes were still locked on the crib. The idea of leaving again, of being taken away, felt unbearable. But deep down, I knew this time there was no fight left in me. The life I had built was gone. The love I once understood was now something I couldn't recognize. I turned to my daughter one last time. "Take care of her," I said. "And when she's old enough to ask about her grandmother, tell her I wasn't crazy. I was just heartbroken." Then I handed the flowers I'd brought, now wilted and fragile, to her trembling hands. "These were for you," I said softly. "But maybe they're meant for her now. Would you have stayed and fought for forgiveness, or walked away to protect your heart? Tell me in the comments. Your answer might be the same one this mother wished she'd had." The paramedics entered quietly, as if afraid to disturb the heavy air that hung over the house. One of them, a young woman with kind eyes, approached me gently. "Mrs. Anderson?" she said softly. "We're just here to help you get settled, okay?" Her voice was warm, almost maternal, but even her kindness couldn't touch the ache that hollowed out my chest. I nodded weakly. My hands trembled as she wrapped a blanket around my shoulders. My daughter stood nearby, her face pale and swollen from crying. She wanted to say something. I could feel it. But every time she opened her mouth, guilt choked the words before they could escape. I sat on the edge of the couch, staring down at the floor, where the petals from the flowers I'd brought were scattered like small, forgotten memories. My husband used to bring me those same lilies every spring. "They mean renewal," he'd say. "Even after the coldest winter, something beautiful grows again." I had believed him. I had believed that love, especially a mother's love, could survive anything. But standing here, in the home that was no longer mine, I wasn't so sure anymore. The officer stepped closer. "Ma'am, the hospital just wants to check your vitals and make sure you're safe. After that, your daughter can visit, all right?" I looked at him, forcing a small smile. "She already visited," I said quietly. "I just didn't realize it would be goodbye." He shifted awkwardly, lowering his gaze. The paramedic reached for my hand. "It doesn't have to be goodbye," she said kindly. "Maybe it's just a different kind of beginning." A beginning. I wanted to believe that, But beginnings usually came with hope, and mine had been buried somewhere between the hospital bed and this doorstep. I slowly rose to my feet, my knees weak, and turned toward my daughter. She met my eyes, and for a brief moment, time stopped. We stood there, just mother and daughter again, two souls tangled in love and regret. She took a hesitant step forward. "Mom," she whispered, her voice cracking, "please don't hate me." I felt something deep inside me shatter again, but this time it wasn't anger or betrayal. It was surrender. "I could never hate you," I said softly. "Even when you forget me, I'll still love you." That's what mothers do. Her sobs filled the room, raw and broken. I reached up and wiped one tear from her cheek, the same way I did when she was 5 years old, and scraped her knee on the driveway. "You'll be a good mother," I said. "Just don't make her forget who you are." The paramedic gently guided me toward the door. As I stepped outside, the cool air kissed my face, heavy with the smell of rain. The night sky was quiet now. No sirens, no thunder. Just the sound of water dripping from the roof. I turned one last time to look at her standing there, framed by the doorway, her hand resting on her belly. For a second, I thought she'd run after me, tell me to stay, beg me not to go. But she didn't. She just watched, her lips trembling, as if her heart was breaking too. And as the ambulance doors closed, I realized some goodbyes aren't loud. Some just ache in silence. Do you believe time can heal a wound like this? Or do some scars never fade? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your story might help someone who's been left behind too. The ride to the hospital was quiet. The soft hum of the ambulance's engine filled the silence I didn't dare break. The young paramedic sat beside me, checking my pulse, her touch gentle and professional. But I could feel her eyes on me. That kind of look people give when they're not sure whether to treat you like a patient or a person. I stared out the small window, watching the raindrops race each other down the glass, blurring the city lights outside. Every passing street felt like another piece of my life disappearing behind me. My home, my daughter, my freedom. Everything I had left was shrinking in the reflection of that window. I closed my eyes, trying to hold on to something. A sound, a scent, a moment that still belonged to me. All I could find was the memory of her laugh when she was little. That bright, unfiltered joy that used to fill every corner of our home. I held on to that like a prayer. When the ambulance stopped, the doors opened to a world of white light and sterile air. The smell of antiseptic hit me instantly, sharp, cold, merciless. The same smell that haunted my dreams after weeks in the hospital. A nurse with kind eyes helped me down. "Welcome back, Mrs. Anderson," she said, smiling faintly. "We've been expecting you." Her words twisted inside me. Expecting me, like I was a package being returned. I followed her down a hallway lined with closed doors, each one marked with a name. Behind those doors, I could hear faint voices, the sound of TVs, the quiet hum of other lives put on hold. My steps echoed as I walked, each one heavier than the last. When she opened the door to my room, I froze. Everything was just as I remembered it. The bed, neatly made, a small lamp glowing softly, the faint scent of lavender from the air freshener someone had sprayed earlier. On the nightstand, there was a single photo in a frame, one I didn't recognize at first. I walked closer, and my breath caught in my throat. It was me and my daughter. The picture was old. She was maybe 10, her arms wrapped around my waist, her smile missing one front tooth. We were standing in front of that same house before life became complicated. The frame had a note taped to it in my daughter's handwriting. So you never forget how much I love you. My knees buckled, and I sat on the bed, clutching the frame to my chest. The tears came quietly this time, not the kind that screamed, but the kind that burned. All the anger I'd carried began to fade, replaced by something softer. Sorrow mixed with understanding. She hadn't meant to destroy me. She'd just been trying to hold on, the only way she knew how. The nurse peeked in. "Are you all right, dear?" I nodded weakly, wiping my eyes. "I'm fine," I whispered. "I just came home early." She gave me a puzzled smile, not understanding. But I did. Because maybe this was home now. Not because I wanted it, but because it was the only place left for me to remember who I was. I placed the photo back on the nightstand and whispered to it, "I love you too, sweetheart." Do you believe love can survive even after trust is broken? Tell me in the comments. Because sometimes love doesn't end, it just changes shape. That night, I couldn't sleep. The rain had stopped hours ago, but the sound of it still echoed in my mind. Soft, steady, like the rhythm of everything I had lost. The lamp beside my bed cast a warm glow over the room, but the light felt too bright, too clean, almost foreign. I stared at the ceiling, tracing invisible cracks in the paint, letting my thoughts wander where my feet no longer could. I thought about my daughter, about how scared she looked when she called the police, the way her voice trembled, not with hatred, but with fear. Fear of losing control, fear of watching me slip away like her father did years before. Maybe, in her own way, she was grieving me long before I was gone. The thought ached deep in my chest, because maybe I had been doing the same thing. On the bedside table, the photo of us smiled back at me. That little girl, messy hair, scraped knees, always asking questions. Where had she gone? How had we gone from bedtime stories to police sirens? I reached out and touched the frame. My hand shook slightly, the wrinkles in my skin catching the light. "You used to hold my hand," I whispered, "and now you're afraid to touch me." A quiet knock broke my thoughts. I turned my head and saw the nurse from earlier standing at the door, holding a small cup. "Your medicine," she said kindly, "and a glass of water." I took it with a faint smile. "Thank you." She hesitated for a moment, then asked softly, "Do you want to talk about it?" I almost said no, but something in her eyes, gentle, patient, understanding, made me nod. She pulled up a chair beside my bed. "It's hard, isn't it?" she said. "When the people we love start protecting us in ways that hurt." That sentence stayed with me. Protecting us in ways that hurt. That was exactly what my daughter had done. And maybe what I had done to her once too. I remembered the times she'd wanted to go out with friends, and I'd said no because I was scared she'd get hurt. I remembered grounding her for coming home late, yelling when I should have listened. Maybe this was her turn to protect me. Only now I was the child. The nurse stood and gently placed a hand on my shoulder. "Rest," she said softly. "Tomorrow is a new day." When she left, I lay there, staring at the empty chair. Tomorrow. The word felt fragile. But maybe fragile things still had meaning. I closed my eyes, clutching the photo to my chest once more. In the darkness, I made a silent promise that if my daughter ever came to visit, I wouldn't talk about betrayal or loss. I'd just tell her what she needed to hear most, that she did her best. Because sometimes love isn't about being right. It's about forgiving the way we love wrong. If someone hurt you while trying to protect you, could you forgive them? Tell me in the comments. Maybe your answer will help someone who's learning how to forgive too. Morning came softly, with a pale light slipping through the curtains and settling on my face. For the first time in days, the world felt still. I lay there, listening to the faint hum of voices from the hallway. Nurses talking, footsteps echoing, life moving forward even when mine felt paused. I sat up slowly, feeling the stiffness in my bones. The photo was still there, standing quietly on the nightstand like a loyal friend. I smiled at it weakly. "Good morning, sweetheart," I whispered. "You used to wake me up with that same smile." A knock came at the door. "Come in," I said, my voice still raspy from the night before. The door opened, and to my surprise, it wasn't the nurse. It was her, my daughter. She looked smaller than I remembered, her eyes tired, her shoulders heavy. She was holding something in her hands, a thermos and a paper bag. "I brought you breakfast," she said softly, her voice trembling. For a moment, I couldn't speak. I just stared at her, afraid that if I blinked, she'd vanish again. "You didn't have to," I finally managed to say. "I know," she replied, sitting down at the edge of the bed. "But I wanted to." The smell of coffee filled the room, rich, familiar, comforting. She poured it into a small cup and handed it to me. "It's the kind you like," she said, "with cinnamon." I smiled faintly. "You remembered?" She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I remember everything, Mum. Even the things you think I forgot." We sat in silence for a moment, both holding on to the same fragile air, unsure what to say next. Finally, she whispered, "I'm sorry." Those two words hit harder than any argument, any accusation. I looked at her, my heart aching. "For what?" "For all of it," she said. "For calling the police, for sending you away, for making you feel like you didn't belong anymore. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I see now that I took away your home, your peace. I wanted to protect you, but I just ended up breaking you." Her voice cracked, and I reached out, placing my trembling hand over hers. "You did what you thought was best," I said softly. "That's what mothers do too. We protect, even when it hurts." Tears ran down her cheeks, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she leaned forward and hugged me. It was awkward at first, cautious, but then it deepened, became real. Her warmth pressed against my chest, her heartbeat racing against mine. I closed my eyes, breathing her in. That scent, the same as when she was a little girl, vanilla and rain. "I missed you," I whispered into her hair. "I missed you more," she said. We stayed like that for a long while, saying nothing, just existing in the same space again, not as patient and caretaker, not as stranger and homeowner, but as mother and daughter. The world outside could wait. When she finally pulled away, her eyes were softer. "I talked to the doctors," she said quietly. "They said you can come home soon. But if you want, we can find a new place. Somewhere that feels like yours again." I smiled through my tears. "Anywhere with you is home." Do you believe broken relationships can be mended if love is still there? Share your thoughts in the comments. Maybe forgiveness is the first step to finding home again. The sunlight warmed the room as if life itself was trying to heal what words could not. My daughter sat quietly beside me, sipping her coffee, her eyes red but peaceful for the first time. There was a stillness between us, not the cold silence from before, but the kind that follows understanding. I turned the photo frame on the table toward her and said softly, "You remember this day?" She smiled faintly. "Of course. You made me that blue dress yourself. I hated it at first because it was too puffy." I laughed weakly. And you refused to wear it until I told you your father said it made you look like a princess. Her laughter filled the room, fragile but real, like an old song finally remembered. For a moment, it was as if time had rewound, and we were back in that little house before pain and fear had built their walls between us. Then her face grew serious again. Mum, there's something I never told you. The day you left the hospital before, you weren't supposed to go. I got there an hour after you disappeared. I searched everywhere I frowned, trying to remember. I just wanted to go home, I whispered. She nodded. I know. But when the police called saying you'd shown up at the house, I didn't even think. I panicked. I thought maybe you didn't recognize me anymore. That's why I said those awful things. I thought I was losing you for good. Her words pierced me, but not with anger, with recognition, because I had felt the same fear once. The day her father died, she was only 17. I remembered holding her hand at the funeral, watching her cry, terrified that I'd lose her too, that the pain would turn her cold, that she'd retreat into a world where I couldn't reach her. And now, all these years later, we were both living in the same fear, only in opposite directions. I reached out and took her hand gently. You didn't lose me, I said. You just forgot where to find me? She looked down, squeezing my fingers. Do you hate me for what I did? I shook my head slowly. No, sweetheart. I could never hate you. I hate what the fear did to us. But not you. Tears filled her eyes again, and she pressed her forehead against the back of my hand. I'm so sorry, Mom. I'll make it right this time. I promise. I smiled faintly. You already have. A nurse entered then, smiling at the sight of us. It's good to see you two together, she said softly. Family visits always seem to make people stronger. When she left, my daughter turned to me again. Mum, when they let you come home, I want you to live with us. No care facility, no nurses, just us. I'll make room. I'll take care of you. And I'll make sure this time you feel safe. I felt warmth spread through my chest. Are you sure? She nodded. Yes. I don't want to protect you from afar anymore. I want to protect you the way you did for me all my life, by being there. I couldn't stop the tears that rolled down my face. You have no idea how much that means to me, I whispered. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds, painting the sky gold. For the first time in a long time, I felt something gentle return to my heart. Hope. Do you think love can truly heal when both sides finally understand each other's pain? Share your thoughts in the comments. Sometimes, healing begins with a single conversation. Later that afternoon, my daughter helped me walk outside to the garden behind the hospital. The air was crisp and sweet, carrying the scent of wet grass and blooming lavender. I hadn't felt sunlight on my skin for weeks. It felt like touching life again. The world was moving, breathing, alive. And for the first time, I didn't feel like a ghost inside it. She guided me toward a wooden bench near a small pond. We sat in silence, watching the ripples dance on the water. You used to love this, she said softly. When I was little, you'd bring me to the park every Sunday after church. You'd tell me the ducks were talking to each other. I smiled. They always had something to say. You just had to listen. She chuckled faintly, then her laughter faded into a sigh. I stopped listening for a long time, Mum. I got so busy being afraid of losing you that I didn't notice I was the one pushing you away. Her honesty stung, but not in a cruel way. It was the kind of truth that frees you, even when it hurts. I turned to her and said, You were doing what you thought was right. Fear makes us do strange things, sweetheart. It makes us forget that love isn't about control, it's about trust. She looked down at her hands, resting on her stomach. The movement was small, instinctive. I followed her gaze and smiled softly. How far along are you? Her face lit up with something I hadn't seen in years. Joy. 7 months, she said, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. It's a girl. A girl. My breath caught for a moment. I imagined holding her. Tiny fingers, soft skin, eyes wide with wonder. My granddaughter. A new life, a second chance. My eyes filled with tears. She'll change everything, I whispered. You'll see. The moment you hold her, the world will never look the same. My daughter smiled, but her eyes shimmered with guilt. I want her to know you, Mum. I don't want her to grow up thinking you're just a story I tell. The lump in my throat made it hard to speak. Then don't wait too long, I said. Memories fade, but love, that's what we pass down. She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. I promise, Mom. You'll meet her, and she'll know how strong her grandmother is. I reached out, brushing her tears away. Not strong, I said with a gentle laugh. Just stubborn enough to keep loving, even when it hurts. We sat there for a while, saying nothing more. The sun dipped low in the sky, wrapping everything in a soft orange glow. The ducks glided across the pond, calm and certain in their rhythm. For the first time, peace didn't feel like something far away. It was sitting right beside me. When the nurse came to call us in, my daughter stood and offered me her arm. Come on, Mum, she said, smiling faintly. Let's go home. Her words carried a new meaning now. Not a place, but a feeling. Home wasn't the house, or the furniture, or the memories locked inside it. Home was forgiveness, and she had just given it back to me. Do you believe forgiveness can rebuild what fear once destroyed? Tell me in the comments. Sometimes, the greatest healing begins with a single word: forgive. That evening, as the sky darkened to shades of violet and gold, my daughter helped me back into my room. The faint hum of the hospital blended with the sound of rain returning outside. Soft, rhythmic, steady, like a heartbeat, reminding me that life still pulsed on. She closed the curtains halfway, letting just enough of the dying light seep in. You should rest, Mum, she said, smoothing the blanket over my legs the same way I used to do for her when she was little. I watched her carefully, memorizing every detail. The way her brows furrowed when she was trying not to cry. The way her hands trembled slightly every time she reached for mine. Time had taken so much from me. My health, my memory, pieces of my independence. But seeing her there, caring for me, I realized it hadn't taken everything. It hadn't taken love. Do you remember, I said softly, when you used to sneak into my bed during storms? You said thunder made your heart hurt. She laughed through her tears. And you'd say the thunder was just God moving furniture? I smiled. You believed it for years. I still want to, she whispered. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was gentle, full of shared memories that didn't need to be spoken aloud. But then her expression shifted. Serious, uncertain. Mum, she began, hesitating. I've been thinking, maybe it's time we sold the house. My chest tightened. I turned my head slowly toward her. Sell it? She nodded, her voice careful. It's too big, too full of old things. Too full of pain, maybe. We could start fresh, a new home, somewhere peaceful, somewhere we can build something together. For a moment, I didn't answer. My mind drifted back to that night. The sound of her voice calling the police, the flashing lights, the way she looked at me like I was a stranger. The house had been my anchor, my last connection to the life I'd built with her father. Selling it felt like losing him all over again. But then, as I looked at her, I saw something I hadn't before. Not guilt, not fear, but hope. She wasn't asking to erase the past. She was asking to stop letting it hurt us. I exhaled slowly. If we sell it, I said quietly, I don't want it to be because of what happened. I want it to be because of what's next. Her eyes filled with tears, and she nodded. Then that's what it'll be, Mum. A new beginning, I smiled faintly. Your father would have liked that. He always said the past isn't a place to live. It's a place to visit when you need to remember who you are. She reached for my hand, gripping it tightly. I think he'd be proud of you, she said. Maybe, I whispered, but I'm prouder of you. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance, soft and low, not frightening, just alive. And for the first time in a long time, the sound didn't make my heart ache. It sounded like furniture moving again, like God, rearranging things for something better. Would you let go of the place that hurt you if it meant finding peace again? Tell me in the comments. Sometimes letting go isn't losing, it's finally choosing to heal. The following morning felt different, lighter, almost sacred. The air was calm, the kind that carries quiet promises only the heart can hear. A nurse helped me into a wheelchair and guided me to the hospital courtyard, where my daughter was already waiting. She was sitting under a blooming cherry tree, a small folder in her hands, and that same nervous smile she used to have before confessing something important. As soon as she saw me, she stood and waved. Mum, she said, walking closer. I talked to the doctors. You'll be cleared to leave in a few days. My chest tightened, a strange mix of relief and fear. And after that? I asked softly. She knelt beside me, her voice trembling. After that, you're coming home. With me. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I looked at her, the sunlight framing her face, and for the first time she looked not like my little girl, but like the woman I always hoped she'd become. Strong, brave, and full of heart. I nodded slowly, fighting back the tears. I'd like that. She smiled, pulling out the folder. There's more, she said, her tone hesitant but hopeful. I started filling out the paperwork to sell the old house. But before I sign anything, I wanted to ask if there's something you'd like to keep. I stared at her, realizing how much she had changed. Months ago, she would have made that decision alone. Now she was asking me, including me, seeing me. I smiled faintly. There's a box in the attic, I said. Inside are letters your father wrote to me while we were dating. They're old, faded, but they still smell like rain. Don't let them get lost. She nodded, her eyes glistening. I promise. We sat there for a while, under the cherry blossoms, their petals falling gently around us like snow. I watched one land in her hair, and before I could stop myself, I reached out to brush it away. You have his eyes, I said softly. She smiled, a tear rolling down her cheek. I know. You used to tell me that every time I got in trouble I laughed, the sound shaky but genuine. That's because I could never stay mad at you. Her expression softened. You're not mad now, are you? I shook my head slowly. No, sweetheart. I think I finally understand. She leaned forward, resting her head against my shoulder. I wish I could go back and change how things happened that night, she whispered. I wish you never had to feel so unwanted. My throat tightened. I took a deep breath and said, maybe we needed that night. Maybe that was the only way to see what we were really losing. She pulled back slightly, looking at me through her tears. And what was that? I smiled faintly. Each other. A silence followed, the kind that doesn't need words because it's already full of them. Around us, the petals kept falling, soft and endless, like forgiveness descending from the sky. Do you think sometimes pain is the only path that leads us back to love? Tell me in the comments. Maybe the hardest moments are the ones that finally teach us how to hold on. The next few days passed in a gentle blur. Nurses came and went, checking my vitals, bringing meals I barely tasted. But my mind wasn't in that hospital room anymore. It was already outside, beneath that cherry tree, beside my daughter. She visited every day now, always with a warm smile, always with something new to share. A baby name she was considering, a memory she had found tucked away in an old photo album. It felt like we were stitching something back together, one quiet conversation at a time. On my last night there, I couldn't sleep. The moonlight spilled across the floor, painting soft silver lines across the bed. I sat up and looked at the small suitcase packed neatly by the door, my few clothes, a book, and that framed photo of us. I smiled faintly, thinking how life has a way of returning us to the places we thought were gone. Not the physical ones, but the emotional ones, the ones inside the heart. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. "Come in," I said, expecting the nurse. But it wasn't her. It was my daughter again. She slipped inside quietly, wearing one of her old sweaters, her hair pulled back in a loose bun, just like she used to when she was a teenager sneaking into my room to talk about life. "You're still awake," she said softly. "So are you," I replied. She smiled faintly and sat at the edge of the bed. I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about tomorrow, about bringing you home. I nodded, my heart warming. "You're nervous." She laughed quietly. "Terrified, actually. I keep wondering if I'll do everything right, if I'll be a good mother." I took her hand gently. "You already are." Her lips trembled. "I haven't even started yet." "Yes, you have," I said, squeezing her fingers. "You're learning what love really is. Not the perfect kind that never breaks, but the kind that chooses to stay even after the pieces have fallen apart." Tears welled in her eyes, and she leaned closer. "I used to think you were invincible," she whispered, "that nothing could ever hurt you." I smiled softly. "And I thought you'd never grow up." I guess we were both wrong. We both laughed, though it came out quiet and cracked. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out something small, a folded piece of paper, yellowed at the edges. "I found this," she said, "in one of Dad's old books. It's addressed to you." My hands trembled as I unfolded it. The handwriting was his. Strong, familiar. My heart caught in my throat as I began to read. "If you're reading this, it means time has moved faster than we wanted. Promise me something, love. Don't let the house become a cage. Let her build her life without guilt. And when it hurts too much to hold on, remember, love doesn't live in walls. It lives in people." The words blurred through my tears. I pressed the paper to my chest, feeling the ache of both loss and peace. "He always knew," I whispered. My daughter nodded, her tears falling freely. "He did." I reached out and touched her face. "Then we'll do what he said. We'll start again, not in that house, but in our hearts." She smiled, her voice barely a whisper. "Together?" "Always," I said. And in that moment, I realized forgiveness wasn't about forgetting what happened. It was about remembering without the pain. Have you ever found peace not by fixing the past, but by accepting it? Share your thoughts in the comments. Maybe peace begins when we stop fighting what already is. The next morning, the hospital halls seemed brighter than usual. Sunlight poured through the tall windows, painting golden stripes across the polished floor. The nurse came in with a smile that carried the kind of warmth only people who witness healing every day can understand. "Ready to go home, Mrs. Anderson?" she asked. For a second, I didn't answer. The word home still felt complicated, heavy with memories and meanings that had changed shape. But as I looked at my daughter standing by the door, holding my coat with one hand and a bouquet of fresh lilies with the other, I realized something. Home wasn't a place anymore. It was her. "Yes," I said finally, my voice trembling with both fear and hope. "I'm ready." The ride back was quiet, the soft hum of the car blending with the sound of the city slowly waking up. My daughter glanced at me in the rearview mirror now and then, as if she was still making sure I was real, that I was really coming back. I caught her eyes once and smiled. "You don't have to keep checking," I said. "I'm not running away again." She laughed gently. "I just want to make sure you're comfortable." When we reached her house, our house now, as she had promised, I noticed the little things she had changed. A ramp by the porch, a rocking chair near the window, pictures of us on the hallway wall, ones I hadn't seen in years. Every detail felt intentional, as if she had carefully built this space to remind me that I belonged here. Inside, the smell of freshly baked bread filled the air. "You baked?" I asked, surprised. She smiled proudly. "You taught me how to. I figured it's about time I showed you I learned." I laughed softly, the kind of laugh that comes from a heart remembering what joy feels like. We sat together in the kitchen, breaking bread like we used to on Sunday mornings. She poured me tea, with cinnamon, of course. "Just the way you like it," she said. The house was quiet, but not empty. It was the kind of silence that wraps around you like a blanket. I glanced toward the living room and noticed something that made my chest tighten. On the wall, above the fireplace, was the old family portrait I thought she'd thrown away. Me, her, and her father, all smiling, caught in a moment before the world got complicated. "You kept it," I whispered. She looked at me, her eyes soft. I couldn't throw it away. I just couldn't look at it for a while. I nodded slowly. "I understand." We sat there for a while, eating in silence. But it wasn't an uncomfortable one. It was peaceful. Every bite tasted like forgiveness, every glance like healing. The sound of life filled the spaces where pain used to echo. As the afternoon sun streamed through the kitchen window, I reached for her hand. "I don't know how much time I have left," I said quietly, "but I want to spend whatever it is right here, helping you, helping her." I glanced at her growing belly and smiled. "She's going to need both of us." She squeezed my hand tightly. "Then we'll do it together." And for the first time in a long, long time, I believed her. Do you think family can find its way back, even after breaking apart completely? Tell me in the comments. Sometimes it's not time that heals, but the choice to love again. Days turned into weeks, and the rhythm of our new life began to settle in. Each morning, sunlight filtered gently through the curtains, and my daughter would peek into my room with that same soft smile she had when she was a little girl, waking me for school. We had fallen into an easy routine: breakfast together, short walks in the garden, quiet afternoons filled with stories of the past and hopes for the future. The air of tension that once lived between us had dissolved, replaced by something tender and unspoken: peace. One afternoon, while she napped on the couch, I sat by the window knitting tiny booties for the baby. My hands trembled slightly, but the rhythm soothed me. Stitch after stitch, I found myself weaving forgiveness into every loop. Forgiveness for her fear, for my anger, for all the words we said that night that couldn't be taken back. Love, I realized, wasn't about erasing pain. It was about choosing to stay even after the storm had passed. The doorbell rang softly, and I got up slowly, expecting it to be the mail. But when I opened the door, I froze. A man stood there, holding a small wooden box. His face was kind, his eyes patient. "Mrs. Anderson?" he asked. "I'm from the old church down the road." "Your daughter asked me to bring this." I nodded and took the box, thanking him quietly. When I set it on the table and lifted the lid, my breath caught. Inside were pieces of my past. Photographs, yellowed letters, a few small trinkets wrapped in tissue paper. And right on top was my wedding ring. Tears blurred my vision as I picked it up. It still fit perfectly, though my fingers had grown thinner with time. I turned it in the light, remembering the day my husband slid it onto my hand. "No matter what happens," he'd said, "let this remind you where home truly is." My daughter stirred on the couch and saw me standing there. "Mum," she said, her voice soft, "I was going to give that to you tonight." I asked the pastor to bring the box from the house. "I thought maybe you'd want to keep something from it before we let it go." I looked at her, the ring glinting between my trembling fingers. "You kept all this?" She nodded, tears in her eyes. "I couldn't throw them away. They were pieces of you. And I think I needed them more than you did." I walked toward her and placed the ring on her palm. "No," I said, closing her fingers gently around it. "Now it's yours. Someday, when she's old enough," I nodded toward her belly, "give it to her. Tell her it belonged to a woman who loved too much, hurt too deeply, and forgave anyway." She began to cry, shaking her head. "I can't take it." "Yes, you can," I said softly, "because love doesn't stay still. It moves, from hand to hand, from heart to heart. That's how it survives." She hugged me tightly, her tears soaking into my shoulder. "I don't deserve you?" she whispered. I smiled through my own tears. "No one has to deserve love, sweetheart. We just have to remember not to waste it." Outside, the church bells rang faintly in the distance, echoing through the quiet neighborhood. A sound not of endings, but of beginnings. If you could pass one thing down to someone you love, a memory, a lesson, a piece of yourself, what would it be? Tell me in the comments. Sometimes what we leave behind isn't things, it's the love we taught. The weeks that followed moved softly, like the turning pages of a book nearing its final chapter. My daughter's belly had grown round, and with every passing day, I could see her becoming the mother she was always meant to be. Patient, gentle, protective in all the right ways. There was something poetic about it all. Once, I had carried her inside me, keeping her safe from the world. Now, she carried another life inside her, and somehow, it was she who was protecting me. I spent my mornings sitting by the window, knitting small things for the baby, hats, socks, and blankets the color of clouds. Each stitch felt like an apology wrapped in love. And when my daughter joined me with her tea, we'd talk about everything and nothing. Memories of her childhood, her favorite songs, the things she wanted to teach her daughter one day. There was laughter again, the kind of laughter that feels like sunlight after a long storm. But one night, something unexpected happened. I woke to the sound of movement in the hallway. Hurried footsteps, the low murmur of pain. My heart raced. I opened my door, and there she was, clutching her belly, breathing unevenly. "Mom?" she gasped, her face pale. "It's time." I rushed to her side, my hands trembling but steady enough to hold her arm. "Okay, sweetheart?" I whispered, guiding her toward the car. Deep breaths, just like we practiced. The ride to the hospital felt endless and instant all at once. Every contraction made her grip my hand tighter, her body shaking, her fear barely hidden behind her strength. And in that moment, everything else, the fights, the pain, the years of distance, disappeared. All I saw was my little girl again, the one who used to cry in my arms after scraping her knees. And I realized a mother never really stops being one. When we arrived, nurses rushed her inside. They asked me to wait in the hall, but I couldn't sit still. I paced, whispered prayers, and clutched her ring in my hand like a lifeline. Time stretched painfully. Minutes felt like hours. Then finally a nurse appeared at the door, smiling. "Congratulations," she said softly. "You're a grandmother." The words hit me like light. Warm, blinding, healing. A grandmother. After all the heartbreak, the loss, the loneliness, life had given me a new reason to stay. When they let me in, my daughter was lying in bed, exhausted but glowing. Her hair clung to her forehead, her cheeks flushed, and in her arms lay the tiniest, most beautiful thing I had ever seen. "Mom," she whispered weakly, her eyes shining with tears. "Meet her. Meet Grace." I reached out with trembling hands, and she placed the baby in my arms. She was so small, so impossibly perfect. A new heartbeat, born from generations of love and mistakes and forgiveness. I traced her tiny fingers, and one curled around mine. That simple touch unraveled everything. The pain, the anger, the regret. All of it dissolved into something pure. "She has your eyes," I said, smiling through my tears. "And your heart," my daughter whispered. I looked at her. My daughter, my miracle. And then, at the sleeping baby in my arms. In that moment, I knew the truth. I hadn't come home too early that night. I had come home right on time. Do you believe some moments are meant to happen exactly when they do, not a second before or after? Share your thoughts in the comments, because maybe life's greatest heartbreaks are just the path leading us back to love. Weeks passed after Grace's birth, and the house filled with sounds I hadn't heard in years. Laughter, tiny cries, lullabies whispered in the dark. Life had begun again, quietly and beautifully in ways I never expected. I'd sit in the rocking chair by the window, holding my granddaughter as she slept against my chest, her tiny breaths syncing with mine. Each rise and fall of her chest felt like forgiveness, gentle, wordless, complete. My daughter would sometimes watch us from the doorway, her eyes soft, the guilt that once haunted her now replaced by something deeper. Peace. One evening, the sun began to set, casting warm orange light through the curtains. My daughter came into the room, holding 2 cups of tea, mine with cinnamon, as always. She handed it to me and smiled. "You know," she said softly, "when you came home that night, I thought everything was falling apart. But maybe it was the only way things could fall back into place." I looked down at Grace in my arms, then back at her. "Sometimes," I said, "love needs to break before it can grow." "You didn't lose me that night, sweetheart. You found me again. The real me. The one who could finally let go of the past." She sat beside me, resting her head on my shoulder. "Do you ever wish it hadn't happened?" I thought about that question for a long moment. The fear, the shouting, the flashing lights, the heartbreak that felt like it might kill me. And then, the healing, the honesty, the birth of Grace. No, I whispered finally. Because if it hadn't happened, we'd still be lost, pretending to be fine while carrying years of pain. That night hurt, but it woke us up. She nodded, her hand resting over mine. You were right, Mom. Love doesn't live in walls, I smiled faintly. No, it doesn't. It lives here, I pointed to her heart, then to mine. And here. For a while, we just sat there, 3 generations breathing the same air, bound by blood, mistakes, and forgiveness. The kind of quiet that only comes after storms filled the room. I could hear Grace's soft sighs, the clock ticking steadily, the world outside slowing down. My daughter lifted her head and whispered, She's lucky to have you. I smiled, my eyes glistening. No, my dear. I'm the lucky one. I got to see my little girl become everything I ever hoped she'd be. Strong, brave, and full of love. As night settled, she took the baby and kissed my forehead. Rest, Mom, she said. I'll see you in the morning. When she left, I looked once more out the window, the same window I had stared through so many times before, when I thought I had nothing left. But now, everything had meaning again. The rain on the glass, the echo of laughter down the hall, the warmth in my chest. It all whispered the same truth. I was home. Truly home. I closed my eyes, the faint sound of Grace's lullaby echoing through the house. And for the first time in years, my heart didn't ache. It was full. If you've ever lost something, only to find something more beautiful in its place, share your story below.